Coming to you from the Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. And holy moly, ladies and gentlemen, we have an absolute doozy on our hands for tonight. Now, I don't want to just talk about this game in terms of the ins and outs of what each team needs to do to win this obviously massively important game four. Game four in any best of seven series always seems like the turning point. Either going down 3-1 or tying the series 2-2 is a tremendous difference, both in terms of math, in terms of how you feel, your mentality, all of that stuff. But the reason to me that this game is so historically important is twofold, but it starts with the fact that it has a historically great player in it. Now, I want to talk about Connor McDavid for a second here. So he is 27 years old. He is in the smack dab middle of his prime. Just had another just unbelievable season with those 100 assists. And the fact that he does that coming off a 150-point season, which we also haven't seen in how long. There's a 150-point club, and the worst player on that is Bernie Nichols, who probably no one's ever heard of. He was LA Kings guy in the 70s. But other than that, it's Gretzky, it's Lemieux, it's Steve Eiserman had one of those years. It's some of the greatest of all time. So for him to back that up is unbelievable. And to my eye, and I think to a lot of modern hockey fans' eye, he is the best player we've ever seen. Not the greatest, but the best. Now, there's obviously tons of players who are in the argument for that. Lemieux was 6'6" on skates and the most skilled player in the world for a decade. I totally understand that. He also had two of his prime years straight up ripped from him because of cancer, back issues, etc. He only scored 45 points the year he won his first Stanley Cup and dominated the playoffs, won the Conn Smythe Trophy. So he's definitely in that conversation for best ever. I don't think Gretzky is, because he's so undisputedly the greatest ever. He played so long, he put up these ridiculous stats, but like watching Wayne Gretzky play, I obviously didn't get to see him live, unfortunately. I would have obviously loved to, but going back and watching some of his old games on Sportsnet Classic and just the old highlights, he didn't do anything really captivating. He was just smarter than everybody. He was just always in the right place, always putting the right amount of touch on a pass, always, just one step ahead. He was more of a chess player than he was, a boxer. Whereas, Lemieux and McDavid just overwhelm you with skill. And a guy who's underrated in this conversation, but who I think is actually the closest to McDavid in terms of his skill is Bobby Orr, and in terms of style. So, highlights, you've seen him turn teams around. Like that play where he goes behind the net and the goalie goes flying and a defenseman goes flying and he just waits an extra second and backhands it in. I don't know if you guys know the goal I'm talking about, but if you don't, look up Bobby Orr end to end behind the net. I'm sure it'll come up. And what people don't know is his dominance for a 5-year period, like 1970 to 74. He won the Norris every single year. He won 3 Hart trophies. Obviously, he was first All-Star every year, and he scored 599 points in 367 games, 431 of those being assists as a defenseman in an age where defensemen just didn't do that. I also just want to mention Gordie Howe real quick, but he's not really in this conversation. He's not really in the same like skill league. He was just grit, grind, elbows. He's a bit of a more physical version of Gretzky, if you will. And Sid, he's great too, but he is nowhere near as exciting or skilled as McDavid or Lemieux or is, in my opinion. But why do I bring all of these guys up? Well, these guys won cups quick. And I was shocked when I looked this up. Like, when do you guys think Gretzky won his first cup? Just think in your heads right now. I guessed 26, 27, around the age McDavid is right now. No, he was 23 when he won his first cup. Lemieux was 25. Orr was 21. Gordie Howe was 21. Sidney Crosby was 21. Connor McDavid's 27. And he's down 2-1 in this series. And I got to be honest, even if they come back in this series, I don't love their chances against whoever comes out of that Colorado Dallas series. Looking like it's going to be Dallas. I think that's a bad matchup. I don't think they'd match up well with Florida, who I think still coming out of the East. The Rangers are clearly deeper and better than they are. How much better can this Oilers team get exactly? Like, I remember 2, 3 years ago when these Oilers teams were really starting to make some noise in the playoffs. McDavid and Draisaitl had proven that those two by themselves could pretty much get you in the conversation. Oilers fans, what they were begging for was a top 4 right-handed defenseman because their defensive core in the 21 season I picked out, but this is, same for 2020, 2019. They were always just bad on defense, but 21 was actually a decent year for them. They had Tyson Barrie, who had a good year, Darnell Nurse, who we now know is on one of the worst contracts in the world, Adam Larson, Chris Russell, Ethan Bear, and a young defenseman named Evan Bouchard, who some people had started to think was a bit of a bust. His first couple of years didn't go so well. He was struggling to crack the roster consistently. But he has broken out, ladies and gentlemen. He is playing 29 minutes a game, and he is freaking awesome. He's ripping 101 mile per hour slap shots like they're 90 mile per hour fastballs. Like, he is having no issues on this Oilers blue line, carrying the minutes, carrying their defense, and really taking their power play to the next level, I think. And yet their defense is still garbage. Yet the team around McDavid and Draisaitl still just is below average. Like, they can't get goaltending right. And I'm going to get to that a bit more later. They can't get goaltending right. And that depth, that was such a huge reason the Oilers turned their season around. Guys like Warren Fogle, Evander Kane, a bunch of these, third and fourth liners. I get that, a few of them had been playing with Draisaitl and McDavid because they're split up during the regular season, which will hinder their numbers. But they've gone from productive to not just like less versions of themselves. They've been silent. Corey Perry hasn't recorded a point. Like, they have no depth right now. And I have no one to blame but their management team. And this is just like a Canadian tragedy almost, because it's another wasted year of a generational talent who, by the way, has another top 5 player beside him. And we've seen this recipe work so many times in NHL history, probably the most famous example being this exact team with Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier. You had the Penguins, you had Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Penguins, Crosby, Malkin, and now you have McDavid, Draisaitl, and you can't get that right? Like, before, when they got McDavid, everyone was pissed because they had spent the 6 years before that just screwing up high first overall picks. Remember, they drafted Taylor Hall and then Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and then Nail Yakupov. That was all within like a 3-4 year span, and they screwed all of them up. So they finally get McDavid falling into their laps, and they start to put, a decent team around him. McDavid's obviously awesome. People start to think, oh, maybe this Oilers management crew knows what they're doing. And I think we're finding out they don't know what they're doing. It's just Connor McDavid's even better than all of the expectations had him as coming into the draft. And Draisaitl, obviously, no one thought he was going to be this. And I don't understand how they're going to get better in the crease, which is obviously their biggest hole right now. I still think they need another defenseman, but like next year, how do they get better unless they trade for Linus Ullmark? And if they do that, you're spending $10 million on 2 goalies, one of which isn't going to play because of the Jack Campbell disaster, which again goes back to management. And you still have to sign a backup because Pickard is a UFA next year, and it's just a disaster, no matter which way you slice it. They're the second oldest team in the NHL. This is their year. It should be their year. I picked them to win the cup coming into these playoffs. And listen, all of what I said can be erased. That entire monologue could be rendered moot if they win tonight and go on to win the series. And you know what? That is highly possible. You're going back to Van for a game 5, 2-2, and I like, if I'm the Oilers, I feel good about my chances. But if it doesn't, everyone in that building needs to be fired. And I should have done more research on the Oilers owner, but shame on you. Whoever you are, shame on you. And speaking of, some of the oldest teams in the NHL, I want to pivot to Vancouver real quick because I think people have the wrong perception of what this Canucks team is this year. And I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, but it's perfect now because this team is not some young up and coming core that's taking their big first step here. Everyone's talking about the Canucks like they're this, up and comer who's been building through the draft these last 2 years and finally their prime guys are, starting to rise up like flowers. It's not what it is. Like, take their top two lines on forward and defense. Miller, Besser, Suter. That's been probably their best line. Miller's 31, Besser's 27, Suter's 27. Their second best line, or maybe their best line. I think this series has been their best line. Lindholm, Garland, Joshua. Lindholm's 29. Garland is 28. Joshua is 27. You go to defense. Now, their top two defensemen are relatively young, for sure. Hughes is 24, Hronek's 26. But those are still, prime years. And you go to your second pair, Zadorov's 29 and Myers is 34. Guys, this isn't another, better luck next year kind of squad. Like, oh, shucks, we made a big first step and we ran into the big, mighty Edmonton Oilers in round 2, and we'll be back and better because all of our kids will improve. Guys, these guys are in their prime right now. And I'm not saying that this is cup or bust for Vancouver because a lot of their guys are under contract and they did a really, really good job actually of signing them when their stocks were low, which was clearly come back to pay dividends. But I think the perception of the Canucks is just wrong because Travis Green was such a disaster, their old head coach, and Bruce Boudreau just wasn't a good fit. We see them as this new kind of breakout team because their actual early years were just wasted by terrible coaching and management. So we see this as their early years, when in actuality, these are their prime years. And now they've got the coach for it, and they're showing you what they're about. Now, the reason this game is so important for Vancouver is pretty freaking obvious. You go up 3-1 on the Oilers, you probably punch your ticket to the conference finals for the first time since 2011. Biggest game since 2011 for the city of Vancouver, in my opinion. There's no doubt about it. And then you move on to the conference finals, and I think it's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be Dallas coming out of that series, and you see what happens. But I think the top end, the Canucks are better than Dallas is. It's just going to be tough with that third and fourth line, especially with, Di Giuseppe getting benched and just overall a bit of a lack of depth scoring. For Pettersson not having a line mate for this entire playoffs has been driving me crazy. But this is a huge game, guys. And the fact that they're both Canadian teams, the entire country is going to be watching. This is our number one sport. Doesn't get much better than this. If there's ever a time for you to turn on the TV and put on some NHL hockey, man, it's got to be tonight at 6:30 Pacific. Anyways, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I want to know, what did you guys think of the video? Who do you think is going to take it tonight? Who do you think is going to take the series? Who do you think is going to take the cup? Let me know in the comments below. I am small enough as to where I can read all comments, and I love doing so, so please drop something down there. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed what you heard today. Please subscribe. We have over 230 subscribers on this channel. Are you serious? We're doing big things. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.